Selamat malam kepada semua para hadirin. Terima kasih kepada PSM untuk mengundi saya di sini. Nampaknya saya seorang saja, bukan ahli politician. Sudah kawan saya Ong Kian Meng sudah masuk dalam DAP ya. Tadi masa saya keluar dia cakap, oh sini ada PAS, sini ada DAP, sini ada PSM, jadi Prem ni PKR ke? Kalau tengok TV3 dan NST semua, memang mungkin saya pun dalam komplot sama lah. But actually I'm not. So I'm proud to be the non-politician here. And it's a good thing about coming last is that, knowing that Kian Meng and Dr. Kumar was on the panel and YB Zul, I think all areas are already covered already, right? From the Marxist analysis to all the data to past state. So I don't really have that much to add. But I'll try to make a few points which I think maybe I can elaborate on. And I also want to say a few things critical of PR. As a person who's independent, not a part of PR, maybe I should say a few things also, right? I think if you look from the people's point of view, what are the major concerns? I think really on the top of the list, especially talking to my staff at Malaysiakini, number one is housing, homes. I think all my staff are having a very, very difficult time in homes. And I'm glad to see that Pakatan Rakyat has some initiatives for home ownership. I think that further to those issues, there really needs to be a return of the real property gains tax to prevent speculation. I think that was there in previous years, and that has been abolished to allow for more speculation. It was reduced, I think, during the 2008 crisis. So whenever there's a crisis, the real estate industry always appeals for reduction of taxes. And really the Malaysian economy is sustained by construction. We never end. You look at it, we have towers and cranes, it's always construction, office towers and property. And that has been a real push to keep on increasing construction. And with the quantitative easing policies in the US, a lot of money has come in to Malaysia. I was very surprised to go to Penang and see huge amounts of developments, and people from Hong Kong, China, Singapore buying into Penang, and prices now in Penang being comparable to what is in KL. Similarly in Johor, with the Iskandar Government region, in Kuala Lumpur, huge increase of prices. And I think I've seen my housemates buy further and further away. Recently, one of our editors bought an apartment in Rawang, and it's like half an hour coming from Rawang to Malaysiakini, and it's very, very difficult to buy anything nearby. So really, I think the push for housing is very, very important. But I think that besides looking at the policies that Pakatan has talked about, I think that our housing has also got a lot to do with bad planning. We don't have public transport. Therefore, staying far away is actually very difficult. When I was living in Sydney, I used to stay 70 kilometers from my university. But one train got me there. So I think that a transport system is integral to having lower housing prices, so people can take efficient modes of transport. And I think one thing we have to be critical of Pakatan Rakyat is the failure of Pakatan Rakyat to come up with a good transport policy, especially in Selangor over the last 5 years. I still don't see, although there's something mentioned about transport here, about buses, really where is the planning for transport? For example, the development of the RRI land, the Sungai Buloh RRI land, huge development, but there's been no policy passed by the Selangor government to ensure that there are rail reserves, to ensure there are bus reserves. Where will the bus terminals be? How will people move around using bus and trains? Where are those policies to ensure that new real estate developments in Selangor, in Penang, are actually kept there? Yes?
I saw a few new Pakatan buses going around.
There are a few Pakatan buses here and there, right? But without the policies about local town planning and making sure those policies are enforced, right? All the new residential areas which are developed will be similar chaotic. I live in Subang Jaya, it's chaotic. They're now building the LRT line, very nearby, but it's a total mess. So unless you pre-plan for train and for buses, you're going to end up with chaos. And when Khalid Ibrahim was the Chief Minister, one of the first interviews done by Malaysiakini with him is, what is your transport policy? And he guaranteed that within 12 months, Selangor will have a transport master plan, and we still haven't seen that transport master plan. So while I applaud Pakatan Rakyat's move to ensure house ownership, I think that Pakatan Rakyat has more to go, and could have done a better job in Kedah, Kelantan, Penang and Selangor with regards to house ownership and related to that transport. That is one point. Secondly, I think I would like to talk a little bit about government revenues. I think those were very well articulated about increasing debts and other problems about federal government. One point to note is our total reliance on oil revenues. I think that also has been spoken about by the opposition, and I think it's up to what, 40 or 50%. I mean, I'm sure Kalmeng knows this number.
Yeah, about 40%.
40%, okay. In terms of earnings from Petronas and other related oil revenues, this is an extremely unhealthy situation. And it's gotten this way because of the huge increase in oil prices from $20 US per barrel to about 100 to 120 US dollars per barrel. And the government has done nothing to readdress the situation, to look about creating a sovereign fund, to remove our dependence on oil royalties, to look at other way. And we know that between now and 2020, we will face a crisis in terms of having to import oil and petrols. We will still be a net exporter of gas, and the nature of our oil exports, which is of a higher quality, will get us certain revenue. But as long as we have more cars, more development, more industrialization, we will very, very quickly, perhaps by 2014, become a net importer of oil. And there's totally no planning to do, or what are we going to do with this huge loss of revenues. I'm not sure whether it's been addressed in the Pakatan budget. I haven't had a chance to read the budget, but I think that we need to be very concerned about these revenues. And what are we going to do about it? First of all, we know there's a lot of leakage through corruption. Some estimate what, 20 billion, and a few trillion dollars we are losing through corruption. I think there was a study. Simple things like the approved permits, $20,000 to $50,000 are being lost by giving away to cronyism, and other forms of corruption and cronyism. Government contracts such as concession agreements are not made public. Again, these are ways to funnel money to privileged elites and patrons, and we need to do away with that. I hope that Pakatan, on the day you take Putrajaya, you will make public all contracts. And I saw you had something about unfair acts or something like that, right? And I hope unfair contracts. And I hope you will address that to actually reduce and make sure that these previous agreements are addressed. So similarly, we can see various aspects of government money, public funds money being drained into private hands. And I think that will be a major need to be addressed. So I've covered all government revenues. I've talked a little bit about houses. But one major thing which we did not cover is, I'm not sure how many of you understand this or know this, is that Malaysia, for the first time in our history, is going through what they call a demographic transition. A demographic transition is when your population keeps increasing, right? Now we hit 29 million, right? And if you look at population data, it's divided into 5 years groups. So 50 to 55, 40 to 45, so you got 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, you look at the slices. And a normal country looks like a pyramid. So each younger group is bigger than the group above it. But what happens is that as the country industrializes, the rate of rebirth or new people gets less. So for the first time in the last 10 years, our age group from 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 is less than the group from 10 to 15 and 15 to 20. So from being a pyramid shape, we are now an pear shape, where you're actually decreasing at the bottom. And this is going to introduce huge stresses to the economy because you don't have this growth via population, right? The number of kindergartens, the number of houses, the number of household formations, the number of new people entering the workforce, huge pressures, the number of young people to sustain older generation, the demographic transitions, when they happen in a high income country, it's manageable because the country is already high income. It's already, the amount of money being earned by the individual is already high. When a demographic transition happens in a medium or low income country, it is a disaster. I cannot emphasize it even more, because the country, most of the people are still earning low incomes. And the country is caught between having fewer people and yet not being rich enough to sustain an elderly population. So even countries like Japan and Germany and parts of Europe have such stresses when they go under a demographic transition. What more a country like Malaysia? I'm not sure whether Pakatan Rakyat has looked at this, but this is something of fundamental importance. So you're going to have a crunch, you're going to have a reduction in oil revenue, you're going to be met at the same time with a demographic transition, at the same time you're going to have your debt is hitting higher and higher ceilings, and like Dr. Zul said, we've been running a deficit for 14 years in a row. Unprecedented in most economies our size. So you can see how the perfect storm is forming. Demographic transition, over-reliance on oil, asset bubbles coming from the US, deficit budgets, all at one time. And Dr. Kumar mentioned, the global economy is already in a oversupply and a lack of demand. How are we going to manage this transition? So it's not only about the poor managing it, it's the middle class and every part of society beyond the top 10% of society. So if you ask me, I'm very worried. I'm very glad that Pakatan is doing something about it, but I'm not sure whether it's going far enough. I don't want to take too much of time. I will go, I'm just quickly looking at what am I out. Healthcare, I think healthcare is a major issue which has not been addressed. I'm not sure what Najib is thinking about. I think if Najib looks at Rosmah, he'll probably think that health is going fine in this country. I hope he doesn't learn his economics from Rosmah. But I think healthcare is a major issue. I think, really there's a lot more health issues going on and we would like to see. I'm very worried because my wife was attending a Pemandu lab today, talking about this very issue. And, the basic thing is, okay, how can we profit from all these health problems? So, when this issue of, people growing old coming up, or how can we profit from all these rich elderly people, How can we make money from them? Instead of actually looking what it's going to do for the country. So we are paying huge money to people in the private department, but they're basically working with the private sector to see how we can earn more money. Before I close, I just want to go back a little bit more to Pakatan Rakyat and talk a little bit about I think they have done a lot of good. I think, I'm very happy to see today's statement that the Pakatan budget will not be based on ethnicity. I think that's a dramatic move, and let's give them a big clap. I know it's not easy, because especially there's a lot of pressure to deliver the Malay vote, the Bumi Putra vote. It's not easy to make a statement like that we are going to move away from a fundamental way of how our country has operated in the last 50 years. It takes a lot of political courage, and I really applaud them for that. I note the policies on housing, contracts and transport. But let us also look back at what the state governments have done in the last 5 years. Can they really walk the talk? There's always this, Najib is going about this idea of janji tetapi because he's trying to attack and undermine Pakatan for whether it's actually been able to deliver on its promises, especially at the state level. There are some disappointments, I must say, in Pakatan. For one, for example, the allocation to politicians, constituencies and MPs and others. This was something which was very hated when by the opposition, and I know Dr. Kumar took up a case against federal government for his allocation in Sungai Siput. But this is also being practiced by Pakatan. Instead of having a transparent policy where any civil society, any organization can appeal for funding and can be given funding for projects based on merit, again it's in the hands of politicians. So we are recreating a system where politicians, adults and MPs decide on allocations in districts. Why is federal funds, public funds being allocated via political means? This was totally abused by the BN and continues to be a way that Pakatan Rakyat has adopted. And I'm quite critical of this. People may disagree with me, but I am very critical. And I look forward to Pakatan doing away with this. To create institutions, foundations, public body, transparent bodies. But anyway, so Swaram doesn't have to get money from NED anymore. Sorry. But can apply for transparency, and not only opposition groups, UMNO groups, Polio 4B, whatever it is, can apply in an independent manner to get these funds for projects which work on the ground. I really think that this is something that Pakatan Rakyat should have shown more leadership in changing the way, and I think this would have gained a lot more voters on the ground. We still don't have any like a foundation for democracy, a foundation for human rights, a foundation where civil society can say, these are my projects, these are how I'm going to solve some issues on transport, on cleaning up the Selangor River, on repairing the playgrounds, and appealing for funds and getting allocations so that this work can be done. This would be a real distribution of power, which I think, I look forward to Pakatan doing more of this. And I think that, again, we talked about the government engaging more with people, but seriously have the state governments, especially the state governments and local governments, really engage the Rakyat in the allocation of funds. I don't see it. Even the ministry has briefings and discussions with the private sector about the budget. But I still haven't been invited to any state government discussion about, Selangor funds or something like that. Maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being left out of the loop. Maybe they don't want Malaysiakini to be there. But I haven't. So I think I'd like to conclude that one, we have a perfect storm forming in the country, a very dangerous perfect storm, over-reliance on oil revenue, demographic transition, a global crisis of oversupply and lack of demand, forming, and we are not addressing this thing. Pakatan Rakyat has done well in its promises, has done well in some deliverables at state levels, but still could do a lot more to prove to the Rakyat that indeed they will deliver when they take Putrajaya. Thank you.
Thank you, Premesh.
Malaysiakini.com.
For the Malaysiakini.
For the Malaysiakini.